still not clear on chaos.
It simply deals with predictability in complex systems. That's chaos theory. There's another example.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Rewind Requested Unscripted, or Requested Rewind Unscripted. I say welcome back, it's actually the first time we've done one of these. Welcome everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Today I'm going to be tackling a not superhero movie, but still in the unscripted rewind format, and I forgot to say this as I usually do, but if you haven't seen this movie, of course you might want to before watching and listening to this review. It's going to be as much of an in-depth story analysis as I can possibly muster. So it's time for one of the most talked about and kind of infamous movies ever made. It's Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, 2002. This was requested a long time ago on Patreon by Bag Studios, and I want to say thanks a lot to Bag for his patience on this. This is one of those really intimidating things that's weird to try to come in and talk about, partly because, as I always say with Star Wars stuff, I'm not a big Star Wars guy. I never know why anybody wants me to talk about these things. And yeah, I like Star Wars. I have some Star Wars stuff. I grew up with Star Wars. I'm not the big mega Star Wars fan that even a lot of the folks that come in and chat with me on the channel are. I always feel really underqualified to do this, but I did tackle episode 1 and felt okay about how that review turned out. Of course, that was back when I was doing all of these scripted, and this is going to be a little bit daunting because I'm doing this off the cuff. I did come prepared with a lot of notes this time. Sometimes I don't do that. This movie is, I'll just say right away, and I know lots of folks agree with me on this, is really all over the place and is very confounding and difficult to follow, and it's a real plotty movie for a plot that does not make a whole heck of a whole lot of sense. But it's a movie that's been talked about to death, and I always feel weird coming to a movie like that, or coming into a review like that, because I don't want to waste people's time. I know that I'm going to have to say a lot of stuff tonight that you've heard before. I'm going to do my level best to bring at least something new to the table, or something that came from my brain that I didn't hear somebody else say first. It's difficult to parse that out, because I have listened to this movie and watched this movie be talked about a lot more than I've actually seen this. I don't think I, before preparing for this review, had seen this movie in, I don't know, a decade, but I've seen the Plinkett review on this a whole bunch of times, as I know lots of our viewers probably have. I really enjoy the Red Letter Media videos, and I don't want to take a lot of this review, obviously, talking about that, but I also want to try not to rehash too much of what he says, but the difficult thing in trying to review a movie like this, and this one in particular, and episode 1 is this way too, and obviously the third one, obviously Revenge of the Sith, but maybe this even more than those two is, you've heard so much lamenting and lambasting and making fun of this movie that you have kind of a couple of options if you want to go online and talk about it, and make a video about it. You can either be real brief and just give your own personal opinion and say, do I line up with all of the folks that think that this movie is ridiculous and doesn't make sense, doesn't work, and all of that, or even if you don't, even if you think it's great, do you just do a real brief 5 or 10 minute overview thing? Obviously, that's not what I do on this program, and I try to go as in-depth as I can get away with. Or do you, and especially this podcast format now, I've got, kind of ample time, and I want to make sure that people get their, for lack of a better way of putting it, money's worth. I know what you guys are hoping for when I come on camera and start talking about this. So the other way I can go is just break it down and make observations and talk about all the things I want to talk about, even if it's stuff that people have brought up before. There are some things I'm going to probably avoid just because I've heard them so much. I know that it didn't come from my own brain, and because, not just not initially my point, but I'm not as passionate about it, or I don't have as much to say about it. And so anyway, there is my little preamble about the weirdness of doing this. If you're watching live right now, thanks very much. Welcome. If you want me to talk about anything in particular with this movie when I get done with my initial discussion, you can leave a super chat, and that will guarantee that your question or idea or thought gets talked about, and you can leave regular comments as well. As always, I'm going to kind of go through my own notes and my own thoughts before I do that, although I'm going to do things a little bit differently tonight. I'm going to do kind of some general notions at the beginning of this, and I think then maybe I will go to the comments. I already see a super chat, and it looks like it's kind of in the same realm as a tweet-length review, so I'm not going to read it right now. I'll do that a little bit later, but what I'll probably do actually is check in with you guys live, and then go to the second part of this, because I have a little bit of a different plan this evening for how I want to handle this. So I want to start with the movie's title, Attack of the Clones. That was made fun of a lot when the movie came out, and people thought, that doesn't really sound like a Star Wars title. Like, I kind of get what you're doing, Lucas, because you're trying to make it sound like a old B-movie. Like, the Star Wars movies were in the serial vein before they were in a B-movie vein, but serial still had sometimes those kinds of quirky subtitles, and so I kind of see why he called it that, but it's just inappropriate for what's going on in the movie, right? The clones are not, like, coming at us. They're an army that were requisitioned by a former Jedi, ostensibly the Republic wanting an army. We'll get into all of that because it's very convoluted. But that's the title that you give, like, here's the villains of the film. They're coming. Be scared of the clones. We got clones attacking you guys. And the clones are the closest thing to the good guy army that we have in this. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's two bad guy armies, right? Because it's Palpatine behind everything, wanting this war. He's basically just got his marionette fingers making sure that we've got two factions that are coming at each other. But for the sake of especially extra media, when you get to Clone Wars and stuff, the clones are the good guy army, and you'd think that that title, it would mean they were the villains that we're supposed to be afraid of. So I talked about this a lot with my episode 1 review, but the prequels feel really obligatory, and they don't have to. This is a story that Plinkett says doesn't need to be told, and I say, I don't really care if it's told well. I've always had the attitude that you can make anything work, you just have to make it work, but there's this kind of feeling of, when you get to this movie, and then, I still have this by 3, some people don't, but episode 1, when it came out, I went and saw it and was really taken in by the world and the atmosphere and world building. I really liked the vibe of that movie, and I was like, we didn't really get a lot of story stuff done, but I had a good time with it, and I didn't entirely understand what was happening with some of it, but I guess I didn't really care at that point, and I was in high school at the time, or coming into high school, I guess, and then Attack of the Clones comes out, and I go, okay, I really don't know why we're here. It feels like these movies get made because you have the numbers 1, 2, and 3 before 4, 5, and 6. It feels like it's really all just about numerics. There could be a convincing argument for telling Anakin's story, of course, but that's such a tall order that Lucas is not up to because he's not a narrative storyteller, and prequels are really, really difficult. This kind of becomes the gold standard for how not to do prequels, and when people think of bad prequels. A lot of people go here first. There also wasn't a whole lot of prequel territory in popular culture before this, so this kind of, not that there wasn't anything, but I'm pretty sure this was the first big trilogy anyway, that was, here's a bunch of stuff that happens before what you know and love, and now, of course, we can't stop going backwards when there's nowhere to go in going forwards. I'm sure there were some franchises that had done prequel stuff before, especially horror things and stuff, but with and pardon the sound of plumbing, with Star Wars, you have a backstory that feels just really stretched out until you get to the third movie, as opposed to it feeling like a character-driven piece about a tragic hero, right? In Anakin Skywalker, a guy who, if you've seen the original trilogy, you know that he's going to be seduced and go to the dark side, but it might be interesting to get a character piece in seeing that happen. So I never find it interesting and engaging to be told, you're going to get to see how a thing you know is going to happen, unless there's a story there in the first place, or I can be brought to believe that, okay, there really was a story to tell here. And I said this again in the episode 1 review, but I'll reiterate it. I kind of want to be... There's maybe a couple different ways to do this, but I kind of want to be duped while I'm watching it into feeling like I'm watching Star Wars for the first time, into thinking that it's not retroactive, that these really are the stories that come before 4, 5, and 6, and they were just put in a drawer, or they were lost for a long time, and now we finally found them. And for a bazillion different ways, I can't have that experience. Or, even though the numbers are 1, 2, and 3, if it has to be retroactive, I want there to be a clever or compelling or like good serious reason that I need to have seen 4, 5, and 6 before I go back and experience this story. And I think that there's an attempt at that with Lucas in some of the parallels and mirroring things that he's doing with the original trilogy here, particularly with Empire. And I actually really don't mind that some of those things are mirrored or repeated, because it's not exactly the same story. He's not doing a cookie-cutter narrative that's exactly Empire. What I really wanted, and what the movie is kind of teasing us that we might get, and I just don't think it accomplishes it, is a paralleling story where Anakin goes through some of the same things that Luke does, but goes down the wrong path. And then when we get to Luke, he's constantly tempted to go down that path, but ultimately he prevails where Anakin and Vader failed. But the reason that this was not the right way to go, if you're Lucas and you're not really working with another writer, I realize there's another writer's name on this script, but he clearly didn't get to do enough, and Lucas still very much had the reins. The reason that he should have continued to go forward is because he falls into a bunch of narrative traps that a lot of people do with prequels, I think just because he's not experienced enough as a writer. He says in the behind-the-scenes information in the documentaries and things on the DVDs that he is a visual storyteller first, and he's not really a literary storyteller. He actually comes out and says that. I love how self-aware he is about certain things. Like, he knows that he's not a great writer, and he wants to tell stories visually. And I just wish he had somehow developed a story that he could tell more visually, because he's not really allowing himself to do that very much with this. There's not quite as much, I shouldn't even say quite as much, there's not the visual symbolism with the shapes of the starships and stuff that you had with the original trilogy, at least in a way that pops out to where it feels really significant and simplifies things and makes me just fully understand what's going on. Like, yes, you have the donut ships with the outside of Coruscant that are probably like the older Republic ships. They're round, they're circular, as opposed to angular and sharp. And one represents peace, one represents war and fascism. And then here, he intelligently has more angular ships as the Republic is getting closer to becoming the Empire that will then grow and become really massive and turn into the Star Destroyers in the original Star Wars. So, like, he's trying to do all of that, but the story he's telling is so convoluted and all over the place, and he's trying so hard to make everybody happy that stuff doesn't pop for me, and I want to be able to watch it with sort of more or less with the sound off. I realize that the dialogue is important in the original trilogy, and that you need that, of course, for the characterization and the relationships in those movies, but I kind of feel like a lot of it you could watch with the sound off and at least understand what's happening, if not still be entertained by it and appreciate what's going on. So in one of... On the DVD, there's a place where there's like 3 featurettes, and they're like 10 minutes long each. And one is on story, and this is the order that they're in. One is on story, one is on love, and the other is on action. And that order is absolutely backwards for the priorities of this piece. It should go action, love, and then story. And when I say that, I don't mean that it's too action-driven. I mean, Lucas is interested in the cool visuals and what he can do with the technology, trying to push envelopes forward. A lot of that stuff does not hold up now, and it didn't really work, didn't really hold up great then, but I know at the same time he did still push some envelopes with this. It's just a lot of the things he was attempting to do were too ambitious, and a lot of it ends up looking too much like it's made in a computer, and like it's an animated world where he uses human beings as props to put in it, and that's what's unfortunate about it. I do think maybe you need this movie in order for some of the pioneering technology that he was working on, particularly with digital cameras and with the compositing stuff in a real frame with digital effects in a computer, but unfortunately it doesn't make for a great looking Star Wars movie, and it keeps taking me out. I love the look of Episode 1, especially compared to this. It's weird because one of those features opens with some like old guard film buffs or filmmakers, I'm not actually even sure who they are, or film historians maybe, talking about how important shooting on film is and how much better it looks than digital. And I'm like all with them and agreeing with them, and then suddenly Lucas comes in and goes, so here's why we shot it all digital, and he completely disagrees with those guys, and it's so weird because it doesn't feel like the feature is on their side, or on his side initially. It's really weird, but I digress. So Lucas cares about the action and then the love and then the story, partly because I feel like he is, at least in making these for whatever reason, confused. I shouldn't even say it like that because I've read his original Star Wars script in comic book form, The Star Wars, and he had this with those as well. He thinks story is separate from character. He and Todd McFarlane are like the same guy when it comes to writing. Todd McFarlane writing are really into, again, visual storytelling. They know how to take a scene that they know what's going to happen in the scene and present it in really thoughtful, compelling, interesting, cinematic ways, but in putting together an entire narrative that's character-driven, that's about a person who wants something and has an opportunity for change. Yeah, they're not really all about that. That's not really what they want to do, and so they should be playing to their strengths. And these are all things that I've talked about and complained about before, so I'm not going to stay on them for too long, except to say I think it's really interesting that in the featurettes, George Lucas says that a couple times he talks about plot versus story. reverses characterization, and character and story and plot equal story. That's how storytelling works. So when he says he cut out characterization, and there are a couple of deleted scenes that this movie really needs. It doesn't suddenly make it a great movie, but there's one in particular at the beginning with Padme going to the Senate that is a giant crime that they took out, and it's only a couple minutes scene, and it needs to be there, and it sets up the Senate scene that we get later. It's really weird after you've seen that we don't see that location until like the third act, if you can call it the third act. It's very strange that scene is cut, but there's a couple others too, and he'll say in the setups for those in the features, we cut those because while they gave us really nice character beats and gave us backstory and told us who these people are, so we might care about them. He doesn't say that part. That's me interjecting. Lucas goes, it didn't move the plot along. And as a writer myself, my alarm bells kind of go off as soon as I hear someone talk about plot in that way. You want to propel story. Plot is secondary to, or I shouldn't even say secondary. Again, character plus plot is story, but in my mind, plot actually is secondary to character. Plot serves character, but once you've done that, you have a story, and that tells me everything I need to know about what his mindset is when he's trying to make a story all by himself. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into what the story's about, shall we? That's what we're here for. So we have a number of themes that work to varying degrees of success, and one or two themes that Lucas talks about that either he wanted in the movie or just don't really come out in the film. One of the big ones that the whole trilogy together is working toward is the line that you get from, it's weird that it's from not even an important character, but the new queen of the Naboo, who says, the day we stop believing democracy can work is the day we lose it. That's kind of the whole point of the whole thing, is that the Republic is corrupt, and nobody realizes that, there's some social commentary about what's going on in today's society, of course, and 20 years ago, which is still relevant to today, that you have an ostensible democracy. People think they live in a republic, but we're actually closer to fascism than we realize we are. Or it is more possible than some of the people living in the republic would believe for somebody to swoop in and create panic, create chaos, and then, or if something really chaotic happened, if there was some kind of massive crisis like a war or some kind of natural disaster that destroyed the parts of the society or something, that somebody would easily be able to come in and try to pick up the pieces and simplify things and say, I have the right idea, listen to me, and everybody follows him instead of having a conversation and having a real sense of freedom, and you have delegates that all represent the people. And that's what I think the whole trilogy is supposed to be about. And that's what it should be about, right? You had a republic, and then you had an empire. How do you get there? And historically, that's how it happens. If you have a system of government and a society that is peaceful for too long, and people get complacent, and things and you think that it's never going to crumble, and we've got it all figured out, and you get really arrogant as a society, inevitably, it seems, at least historically, that the society at some point is going to fall apart, or is going to be torn down by something and replaced by usually something scarier. And so that's what we have with Star Wars. A lot of people complain that these movies are too political, and I do too, because the politics isn't done well, and people say it doesn't feel like Star Wars. Star Wars was like a fun adventure serial kind of thing. It was a swashbuckling adventure. Why would you want to bog it down with like sci-fi politics, with people just sitting in a room arguing about rules and regulations and talking about trade and all of that? Well, you wouldn't unless the dialogue is interesting and you still get enough cool, fun Star Wars stuff, and it's just not handled right is the long and short of it. One of the things that makes it weird to go back and I hesitated earlier when I was talking about wanting 1, 2, and 3 to feel like I don't need to see Star Wars, and here's why. And here's why I think it is possible to make these weird retroactively. You are supposed to see the original trilogy without it falling into prequelitis territory, without it retconning things or including a bunch of things just because they became popular in the culture from the original trilogy. Because the backstory, if you turn it into an actual story with Anakin Skywalker, would have to be a different thing. It would have to be more about the political situation, and it's inherently a more complex story, I think, than Luke Skywalker's much more standard hero's journey kind of thing, because the Empire is more in the background in Luke's story, and I think the Republic has to be more in the foreground for this if the idea is Anakin gets with the Emperor and tears down what we had and brings about the Empire. Luke does tear down the Empire, but he doesn't do it politically. He does it as a rebel. The wars themselves are what's important about the original Star Wars. Obviously, Luke's character arc is at the core of that, but I mean, the A story, the real plot, the earth-shattering stuff that happens, and it's about the wars. And there's, I don't want to say a Cold War, but there's something more akin to that going on in the background of the prequels, and again, I think would have to. I do think you could put the wars much more at the front and start with some kind of war that's maybe not even a part of what Palpatine is doing, but because I've always thought that episode 1 should have been, well, I say always, I don't know if I talked about this in my episode 1 review, but I said that movie, the story starts before the story starts. You could put that entire movie in the crawl and at the beginning as the backstory, and then get to part of this movie, or maybe even just after this movie, because even this, there are things in this that I guess have to happen, like Anakin has to get together with Padme, but that's pretty much it. We have a thing called the Clone Wars that is mentioned by Obi-Wan in the first movie, and we know that Anakin fought in it. And that's all we know before this. I realize there's tons of EU stuff now, and that all of this is foundational for everything that Star Wars becomes. I'm coming at this from a 38-year-old guy that saw Star Wars before this stuff came out and went, this is not what I was imagining. This is not what I thought happened before Star Wars. And I would take episode 1 and make it, first of all, Anakin's grown up in the first place and he's already, a Padawan and becoming a Jedi go, and make it, and he's a swashbuckling action hero kind of character, a little bit impulsive, is, too good at the Force for his own good. And you make the first movie the Clone Wars, and you make it a thing that's not connected to Palpatine in any way. It's a war that happens. I guess there's more than one of them, but these are wars, the Clone Wars, that happen independently of all of the machinations with Palpatine. And maybe he could use the end of it to be pragmatic, an opportunist, and that segues into his building the Empire. But I guess I'll go ahead and just mention this now, and then I'll get more into the thematic stuff. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll do this now. So if I think in my episode 1 review, I broke down what I would do with 1, 2, and 3, like when it should start and everything. I don't know if I broke down an idea of what those movies should be, really. And I never want to rewrite the thing, but I still feel like and this is a prequel trap that's really easy to fall into, I still don't feel like we're in the story yet. Isn't it interesting that we have 2 movies out of a trilogy, and then you have this whole Clone Wars cartoon show that's a lot of why a lot of people love this era, where that's where all the adventures happen. It feels like this is almost itself supplemental material. Like, this is backstory. The real stuff, the real meat, the real fun stuff, and where Anakin is actually like a likable character, is in other media, is in cartoon shows and comics and books and other things. That's not how it should be. I'm not disparaging the EU and saying that you shouldn't have fun stories and stuff that matters to the continuity and stuff outside of the movies necessarily, but you should be able to watch them without that stuff, and there shouldn't be a bunch of years in between them where the character himself has to go through a whole lot more stuff and where the real meat of the character arc is happening. And I think that really is what happens with this stuff, not having watched all the Clone Wars. But every time I bring these movies up, there's always people that go, well, Cap, if you like the Clone Wars era, what you really should be looking at is that TV show. And I go, okay, but it's really unfortunate that George Lucas's movies are not the good stuff and can't really be enjoyed properly without that other stuff. And I don't even want to say properly, because I think what happened with those is writers came in and went, this is all messy, confusing nonsense. What do we do with it? And they latched onto like singular lines of dialogue and little ideas sprinkled in here and there that you are a grain of something, a germ of something that you really could run with. And came up with cool mythology that's now what people like about that era. So anyway, first movie would be The Clone Wars, and it's Anakin is the hero, and it doesn't even look like he's going to go to the dark side. Maybe there's some rough stuff in his past where if you know the future, you can kind of draw a line and you can kind of connect the dots. But by and large, he's in the Luke Skywalker place where you could see him kind of going either way. And then the second movie would be, I would think, the actual downfall. I would think you would want to get to the Empire by the end of the second movie, so that the whole third movie could be, even if he's not in the Vader suit yet. And I don't mind that he is, in the third movie, kind of Vader before he puts on the suit, or before he gets his body all messed up and burned and he puts on the suit. And the third movie is Order 66. Whether you like what Lucas called that, Order 66. But the third movie is he's hunting down the Jedi. That's what I would do with it, just loosely. So anyway, other important, or just the themes of the piece, forbidden love, obviously. That's the whole character arc with Padme and Anakin with their love story. That's all it is. It's not any more complicated than that, and it's built on a faulty premise in the first place, where their love has to be forbidden. Both of them. It can't be it can't be just one or the other. It has to go that far, and I've never liked doing that with the Jedi in the first place, where they're not allowed to fall in love and have a family, and they have to be kind of weird space monks. But I also never understood it with Padme. And yes, that's a thing that Plinkett brings up, but I wanted to talk about it too, where she's just a senator. In the way she talks about it in the featurettes, Natalie Portman, is like it's a career decision. I think she either gets her character better than Lucas does, or what she thought the character should be is more like what Lucas should have done with it, where she is career-driven and really passionate about the Republic and worried that it's corrupt and it's falling apart and something needs to be done. And so she sacrifices a personal life in order to put 100% of her time and energy into this. And that's not the way it's talked about in the movie, really. There are scenes where it seems like maybe that's what it is. And I'm going to say that frequently, by the way, throughout this review, this podcast. There are a lot of places where in this scene, it seems like it might be this. And this scene, it seems like, maybe it's actually this other thing. And she's a senator, and they treat it like she is also forbidden to fall in love. And it's so easy to rewrite this. Everything about this script feels like a first draft script. Because I don't mean to say that, there's no way to salvage a lot of, or at least some of what's here, but all Lucas needed to do, is take this to a really good creative writing workshop. Because it feels a lot like scripts, and I don't... Let me say this, too. I don't hate George Lucas. I think he's a wonderful filmmaker. I just don't think that he could do this kind of writing by himself. And so... anytime I'm disparaging things that he did with his script, it's nothing personal. I like all respect to George Lucas for his accomplishments, but this was not the way to make these movies, and I realized that there was kind of weird contractual things and stuff that kind of forced him into writing the first movie by himself. It's been a while since I looked into that, so I don't remember all the details, but I don't fully understand why it happened with this again. Why he's still kind of writing it by himself. It sure watches like that, even though there's another name on it. But anyway, he's I'm forgetting where I was going with all of that. But yeah, there's a lot of places where it seems like he's sort of contradicting himself. Oh, I know what I was saying. It just needs to be workshopped. There's too many places in this movie where I'm kind of taken back to writing school in college and feeling like I'm workshopping a first year creative writing student. And the first movie has some of that too, but this one, just the story is too involved, and he's falling into way too many of the same pratfalls that you do as a first-time writer, right? And as a beginning writer. And again, I realize he's written before, but that's what it reads like, where he's got all of this really stilted dialogue. Everybody always talks about it that way. The characters are very wooden like they were in the first movie, except now there's got to be a passionate love story at the center of it. And so how do we write passionate love dialogue? We go to Shakespeare, and we have characters kind of talking about platitudes before they're talking about anything tangible. And there are scenes where Anakin and Padme talk about their past a little bit here and there. Some of that got cut out too. I don't know why. There's a whole thing in Padme's parents' house where we actually get a little bit of her background and more of a sense of who she is as a person. It's not great material, but it should have stayed in the movie. And then he has going to prequel material. Give me 1 second. He's got to go to prophecy, of course, which we've got in the first movie. He's got to have characters that were massively popular, like I mentioned earlier, from earlier movies that take place later, take center stage, and so it feels really kind of funky, where it's like, if Boba Fett was this important, or at least his dad, but I mean, he's here too, to this story, and to the eventual creation of the Empire, it's kind of weird that he's just sort of standing there in the background, and in a couple of scenes later, you'd think he'd be there a lot more, right? And then you have, again, the issue of Anakin and Padme. Like, we do this a lot with prequel stuff, where you can't have characters just go through things like normal people and have regular plot points. They can't just get married. It has to be a forbidden love, and it has to be, like, nigh impossible for it to happen. Everything has to be as big as possible. And then, so the other things this movie is about, the idea that being a hero requires personal sacrifice. Again, it can't just be the superhero thing, right? There's a lot of stuff with these movies that's easy to talk about on the superhero level, even though they're not superhero movies. You are a hero, and you have responsibility to use your power in a heroic way, in a self-sacrificial kind of way. It's difficult to try to be perfect as possible, and also to be down to earth and not forget the people that you're fighting for, and where you come from, and who you are. And you do have to make some sacrifices, but you have to find that midpoint where you don't totally live above people, and you don't lose the little people in the process. You're still a human being, and you still live among people. And Anakin Skywalker, I always thought, would have been like that and would have lived in that kind of world. But instead, again, it's got to be weird, kind of creepy space monks where they're not allowed to have any personal attachments, and where the idea is not, as Yoda talks about it, even though in this movie he does say mind your feelings or use your feelings to the younglings. The idea seems to be, don't have feelings, be totally stoic, be Vulcan about it, and even kind of beyond Vulcans, just totally walled off from your humanity and from other people. Even though Anakin has that speech about, like, compassion is important, it really watches, like, everybody talks like a plank of wood, and it's not just the Jedis, but it's like, we all, or Jedi, whichever the plural is supposed to be, because I think the movie sometimes uses both, you're supposed to be a plank of wood, and they talk that way in really stilted dialogue because you're not allowed to have your own life and any personal attachments, and you're not even allowed to have like your own personal effects. And maybe that was always the idea in the back of Lucas's mind, and certainly the Jedi were supposed to be like samurai, and so there's kind of there's a sense with that you might lead something of a solitary life. But even if that's what it was supposed to be, the movies don't make a very good case for it, the prequels, because it seems like that's part of what's wrong with the Jedi Order, is that they are too cut off from everybody, and they're too detached, and it seems like they've lost their way. There's a couple scenes about it. It's not brought to the fore. A lot of these ideas are not brought enough to the fore, and I'm not 100% sure if the movie is really about what it seems like maybe it's about. But you have scenes where Yoda is there's one scene where Yoda's talking about, and this was by the way a changed scene. I think I like the original better when it was just Mace Windu and Obi-Wan in a spaceport, partly because there was like stuff happening around them and they were just walking down a boring hallway. But anyway, in that scene, Yoda's talking about how the Jedi now are a lot more arrogant than they used to be. And it seems like he's talking about it like they're, and he says even the older ones. And I'm like, does that include you? Because I can't tell. Because I feel like there's places where you've also maybe sort of lost your way. And so is the idea supposed to be that the Jedi didn't used to be like that? There used to be some passion there. It used to be like what it feels like in Empire, where the point is not don't have friends, don't have personal attachments, but you have to figure yourself out before you can help anybody else out. That's kind of the point of the end of Empire, and I've reviewed that on Rewind as well. And I love this moral for children. I feel like even though Empire is the darkest of the original three movies, and there's some scary, rough stuff that happens in that for kids, it's one of the best kids movies ever made because of the moral of that story. Like what the coming of age tale is all about with that, where Luke can't go help his friends because he's not emotionally and mentally prepared to go do that, and he's too impulsive, and if he goes and helps them, he's going to be a liability, and he has the potential to choose the wrong side. So I would think that if that's your philosophy, the idea wouldn't be that you couldn't take a wife. The idea would be that you would, or a husband or whatever, a spouse. The idea would be you're supposed to learn to be responsible and learn to hone your feelings and control them so they don't control you first. That would be what that's about. But apparently not. Okay, I'm going to move along a little quicker. Somehow I'm already 42 minutes in, and I'm still at the beginning of my notes. I have a lot of stuff to say. Power corrupts is certainly in there. And then there's the question of, and we get into this even more in the third one, I guess, but can peace last any better than power? And I just talked about this, but the idea of being too complacent, and if you forget your history and things are too easy for you, then you might forget it and repeat it. Again, not brought enough to the fore, but seems like maybe that's what it's supposed to be about. And then there's the deleted scene where Padme uses this sentence, and in the features, George Lucas says that this was a big thematic idea that he wanted her to say out loud, and I don't know if it really has much to do with the rest of the movie. And again, it's cut now, so maybe it doesn't matter, but it's weird that there'd be this big thematic idea that she says out loud in dialogue, and it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. She says, if you don't adapt, you die. And she's talking about a friend or a sister or something that something tragic happened to. I saw that scene one time. I forget what exactly she says. But if you don't adapt, you die, which is maybe a foreshadowing thing, because that's certainly what happens to the Jedi. But the question is, if that was still in the movie, is that supposed to be like a lesson to learn, or is it more of an ominous thing? Is it like we shouldn't have to adapt, or because it seems like the idea really is we've adapted too much, and that's why we're going to die. I don't know. I'm not sure what to read from that. Okay, let's talk about what works in this movie. I wanted to do this right at the beginning, and then I talked for 45 minutes. I don't know how that happens. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and read this comment real quick. I wasn't going to do any live stuff yet, but Mana in the comments, and welcome, that's a name I don't recognize. Buddhist monks forsake a material world because they want to have peace. They can't apply that to space knights. Yeah, precisely. That's what I was going to say. For a second, I thought your comment was maybe disagreeing with me and saying that, well, they're based on Buddhist monks, and that's why they do that. The difference is Buddhist monks are about their own enlightenment and maybe enlightening other people, but they're not heroes. They don't go out in the field. They can't, they can't affect life and death in the way that the Jedi can. So, like, it would be kind of different. And I could see an argument maybe made for why you would want to live a solitary life. Again, like a samurai or something. But the movies don't make a good case for it. And it seems like it seems like Anakin goes dark because the Jedi Order is not what it should be and messed up, and maybe he's onto something in the third movie. It's too melodramatic, but when he says, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil, I don't think they're evil, but there seems to be, I'll go ahead and throw this idea out now. This is a real heady, I'm thinking too much into this material kind of thing, but I had this thought last night, rewatching this movie again, when I'm looking at Anakin's new robot hand, and the line comes to me, he's more machine than man now. And I'm thinking, I don't think this is what Lucas is doing, but it's so close to in there somewhere that maybe this is what it ought to be. And again, not trying to rewrite the thing, but there's not enough like actual substantial, coherent stuff to grab onto, cohesive. It feels like this is maybe kind of in there or could be pulled out. So you have a very mechanical, methodical Jedi Order. Like I said earlier, they've gotten rid of emotion, it feels like, almost entirely. They've gone maybe too much to the extreme opposite of the Sith. They don't just control their emotions, they just got rid of them. And then Anakin is rebelling against that and says, I have all this passion, why can't I do something with it? Just teach me how to use it, as opposed to ignoring me when I go, there's this girl I really like, yeah, you can't do that, etc., etc. He needs a Professor Xavier before he needs, like a Qui-Gon Jinn. And he ends up obviously going to the dark side, getting his flesh burned off, becoming Darth Vader. He becomes more machine than man. So in pushing against the anti-emotion thing, the people that feel to me like machines, he pushes against that with passion, and he becomes a machine himself. That's really interesting. But I don't know if there's enough there for me to actually really make that read. Anyway, okay, here's what works. Stuff I like, and a lot of this is going to be real kind of small detail stuff, because this is not a cohesive movie. It's very confusing. I don't know what's going on with a lot of it, and I'll get into it at the risk of this movie, or this podcast, taking all night long. I don't know how we're at 48 minutes. I like still the aesthetic of the prequel world. I loved what it looked like in episode 1, and we're still doing some really cool ship designs and some really neat monster designs and technology and all of that. I like that it's so unique compared to the original trilogy. I don't like that it's so that it feels like it should have been an animated movie, and that a lot of it doesn't feel like it's really there in all the blue screen and stuff that, of course, Plinkett went on and on about. There are a lot of cool action set pieces in this movie. I like the variety of different locales, particularly Camino. I wanted to spend the whole movie in Camino, in the theater and now. As soon as we get to that place, I'm kind of engrossed in the aesthetic and the mood of it. It feels real mysterious, and that's where some of my favorite music from the from the John Williams score is, and it's, I don't know, it's like that's all inspired, and the Camino stuff, I'm very confused about plot-wise, but we get there and it's like, ooh, like, where did these cloner people come from? And, like, they live on a planet that nobody can find, and they've got these big, long necks, and they're real kind of ominous, and you don't know if they're going to try to do something to Obi-Wan the whole time he's there. There's a kind of a tension about all of that. I love how the color palette changes when we get there. I love the, like, sea monsters and the water and the waves coming up and everything around it. It's a neat planet. And I wish we could have spent more time there. And that felt like almost a holdover from Episode 1. The Republic, like I said, has become too cold and machine-like, and I like that whole idea, if only it was pulled more out to the fore. Ewan McGregor's whole performance is pretty good, or as good as it can be, despite not having anything to work against. And you can tell that everybody's really frustrated having to work that way. There are occasional flashes of a real friendship with Anakin that I like, but they're few and far between. I like the setup for Luke's adoptive family on Tatooine. I like the guy playing Shmi Skywalker's new husband. The idea of Dooku is really good, and his playing both sides, that he might be a Sith or he might be a rebel Jedi that has a point. It doesn't work because it doesn't play like a mystery at all. You can tell from moment one that he's just a mustache-twirling bad guy, but to listen to Lucas and Rick McCallum and those guys talk about it behind the scenes, it seems like that whole thing was supposed to be ambiguous, and we were supposed to wonder whose side he was on until you realize that he is playing both sides and that he is just using people as a means to an end. I don't ultimately understand a lot going on with Dooku. The idea that Anakin would be tempted to the dark side because he wants the power to stop people from dying is really good. It's insanely contrived when we get to the third movie, of course, but I love the idea that you would have the Superman situation with Richard Donner's Superman, where Clark can't save his father from dying from a heart attack because he just has the power to, fly around and stuff. He can't. I mean, it turns out he actually could go back in time and change that, but we'll forget that that's in that movie for the sake of this discussion. Maybe I'll re-review that at some point. But I like the idea of a tragic, damaged hero that goes the opposite direction because of that. It's a good idea. It's not handled well. I also think that in those scenes, Christiansen is genuinely intense, and I finally understand why he got the part, because he doesn't feel like he fits in this world to me. He's got the whole kind of CW pretty boy look, and I feel like it makes it too modern. Forget his acting and some of the weird line readings and stuff, and I blame Lucas for that, honestly, and his directing, I think, more than I do Hayden Christensen, but he just feels too contemporary. He feels too 2002 to me. But then I see the intensity in his eyes in those scenes when he, murders the Sand People, and I go, okay, now I can kind of see where Lucas was going. I see the logic, the kind of wisdom of let's pick a guy based on how intense and scary he can get because he's got to turn into Vader. Like, let's start from that place. The problem is he's got sort of that, like, emo or just, angry-faced thing too often before he's all that tempted by the dark side. So he's just too tortured from the beginning for a kid that we're told is a slave but doesn't seem to have, a bad enough life initially for being a slave. I like that Anakin and Padme are both proactive. There's a lot of places where, with a movie that feels as passive in a lot of ways as it does, I'm kind of surprised the moments where they act like original trilogy characters, where it's like, oh, somebody that we care about is in danger, let's rush off and do something about that. So, like, they always rebel when it's the right thing to do, and suddenly you can see a little bit of that original trilogy rebellion in them, and that's good. There's some occasional comedy I like. Most of the time, it doesn't necessarily land, or there's just not enough, like, actual real levity. But I like the exchange on Geonosis when Anakin says, they're tied up and they're about to be executed, and he says, well, we decided to rescue you, and then Obi-Wan just goes, good job. That's funny. I like a couple of bits like that. And there's also some occasional banter that, again, reminds me a lot of original trilogy stuff, and I'm like, where has this been the whole movie? You call this a diplomatic solution? No, I call it aggressive negotiations. No, that's pretty good payoff from lines earlier. Where has that been this whole movie? And back to Dooku, I like the idea that he's supposed to be kind of like in evil older Obi-Wan, like if Obi-Wan in his 70s, like he is in the original movie, went to the dark side, this is what he'd be like. That's cool, and obviously Christopher Lee is amazing and really wants to be there, and you can tell that he's taking the material really seriously, and that he thinks he's in a better movie than he is, but it helps to elevate the material, so that's good. He says in the behind the scenes that, and I need to watch more Christopher Lee stuff, that he's been in or had, obviously he's passed away now, and R.I.P., but he says that he was in more sword fights on camera than any actor in history. I didn't know that. That's really cool. So yeah, those are some things I like. Nothing, not enough that's like huge and major, and I feel like I'm having to dig a little bit too much for accolades. But I didn't want to spend the whole time complaining and not talk about anything I really actually enjoyed about this movie. Okay, we have a couple of super chats, I think, and I'm gonna go ahead and knock those out before I get into the rest of my notes. So, Robert Wild, $5 super chat. Not a very good movie, but I enjoy it in parts. It's the first Star Wars movie I remember watching when I was little, so I still have some nostalgia for it. Yeah, I can't imagine what my feelings would be on this if I'd grown up with it, as opposed to being kind of blindsided by some of the choices, where when I was growing up, I was always imagining what was Anakin Skywalker like, and what were the Clone Wars. Because it's one line of dialogue, but when you're a kid in the 90s reading comics and clones come up all the time, immediately your ears perk up and you go, ooh, I wonder what Star Wars did with clones. Because I always imagined that, and I'm not saying this is what it had to have been, I don't like what it turns out to actually be. I think it's a little bit lame, and it's trying way too hard to appease fans of Boba Fett and to get stuff that you can merchandise. But like, merchandising is a major force, it feels like, in this, and if it's not, you could have fooled me. But when I was a kid, I was like, I wonder if it was clones of characters you would know during that period. Like, if there was a 1, 2, and 3, and you're watching them and you get to know these characters, and then it's a war with clones of themselves. Yeah, that's what I always imagined. Something like that. Bag Studios, who was our requester this week, thanks Bag, $4.99. I'm thankful for this movie only for one reason: Clone Wars, the TV show. Lots of what I love in the TV show, or I guess just maybe the period. Lots of what I love in Star Wars starts here. Unfortunately, the piece itself really sucks. Yeah, and that's what's so frustrating about it to me too, because I like living in the environment of this world. Going back and watching this again a couple of weeks ago, knowing that this was coming up, I suddenly got in the mood to play clone era video games, and I went in the private Geekflution Discord, and I asked those guys what games were worth playing, and they gave me some suggestions, and I've been playing some PS2 clone era games. So, like, I like this period a lot. I just wish I cared more about these characters and understood anything that was happening in this, or at least very much of what was happening in this. So, well, there's my notes about prequelitis and writing 101, which I've already pretty much gone through. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to my second big part of this, I think. I'm trying to decide how much of this I need to talk about. Okay, let me bring this up first. So, I've always been confused about what the balance of bringing balance to the Force means. That Anakin Skywalker, there's a prophecy, because of course there is. It's a prequel, and just like with Boba Fett, we have to make Darth Vader even way more important than he probably originally was conceived as in Lucas's mind, because he's such a big deal. Lucas is not the only person at fault with this with different franchises. Spock has the same problem in Star Trek, but not to this degree. He's not like Jesus. He wasn't immaculately conceived or anything. But this idea of Anakin bringing balance to the Force. Now, I'm sure that EU stuff runs with this, and that some of you guys watching right now that are big Star Wars people, not like me, despite the t-shirt, know what that is based on what other writers have done with it. But just looking at these movies, and at this movie, and the next one in particular, here's how it's suddenly reading to me. And I don't know if this is intentional. I'm trying to go just with the material we have in the piece, but something locked in for me this time, and I just wanted to share this as a possibility. So, Anakin is supposed to bring balance to the Force. And going back to my point earlier about the Jedi maybe becoming stolid in a way they didn't used to be, what if the idea is, right now it's shades of gray and it's not supposed to be. We don't know who the good guys and bad guys really are, and the Force is supposed to be light side and dark side. Ergo, the prophecy is Anakin actually becomes Darth Vader, and then and then it becomes as much about Luke as it does him, in order to turn Star Wars into Star Wars. What I mean is getting it away from the politically driven shades of gray thing, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, into the good versus evil story. Because one of the things that's so confusing about this is it watches like a good versus evil story, but it really isn't. Even if that's what's supposed to be, it's not. When we get to the end, we're looking at two armies of bad guys. The clones are not the good guys, and I mean, they're working with the Jedi, but the movie ends with the Darth Vader theme, with the Imperial March, while we're looking at the clone troopers. That's supposed to be ominous. This is going to turn into the Empire, and we're not that far away from it, guys. It's this weird, almost unreliable narrator thing of the movie knowing the future, but the characters in it not knowing that. So you have all of these ostensible heroes going, yay, we've won, except for Yoda. He sort of knows what's up. And then you have the movie and the rest of us in the audience going, these are stormtroopers, basically, that we're looking at. This is bad. This is scary. So what if the idea is that bring balance to the Force is simplifying it back to the good versus evil story? And then, of course, when you get to the end of Jedi, you have Luke finally fulfilling, or you have Anakin as Darth Vader finally fully fulfilling the prophecy by getting rid of the Emperor, who started all of this in the first place. But, like, he is obviously at fault for creating the Empire and taking advantage of the situation, but I wonder if the idea is supposed to be that the Jedi Order itself kind of brought this upon themselves. But then there's also that question of, and Yoda asked it at the end. It's so weird. There's a lot of characters that are asking the questions I'm asking, but I don't know if the movie actually knows what it is. You get to the end, and there's the question of, I think Obi-Wan asked it, was Dooku right, or was he just lying? And Yoda just says, he's a liar. But like, was Dooku right that that I almost said the Emperor. He's not the Emperor yet, but that there's a Dark Lord of the Sith who's basically mind controlling the Senate. Like, is that what's actually happening? I hope not, because if that's what it is, it's not that interesting. It's not interesting at all. I mean, you're basically seeing, like I said, a puppeteer with marionette strings, and you're going, okay, why am I watching this apparently like master manipulator making all this stuff happen behind the scenes? He's got this big long con that started in episode 1, and he's had to wait 10 years to make this army happen just because that's how long it takes the cloners to make the clones. And you're like, I don't know why I gotta sit through all of this if he's just kind of mind controlling everyone. They say that he's influencing them. Okay, I'm going to go through these very quickly, and then I'm going to answer you guys' questions. I'm not going to stop and spend a lot of time on each of these. I wanted to, originally this was going to be most of the review, but I've already been talking for an hour because I always have a lot to say. But I don't want to break this up into 2 videos. So this movie is, and we haven't even gotten into a lot of stuff, but this is how we'll do it. This movie is baffling, and it's confounding, and it's puzzling, and it's bamboozling, so I wanted to review it with questions. I feel like the only way to really break this movie down is just to ask the questions that I don't have the answers to, because that's how I'm feeling. That's what I'm doing while I'm watching the movie. It's just a lot of questions. I have a bunch of them, you guys. I have 73 questions. 73! And I'm going to ask them right now. Are you ready? Here we go. Number 1, and some of this will be things I've already brought up, but I'll go through this very quickly. Number 1, is Palpatine behind the plot on Padme? This is going to go mostly chronological. Or is it just Dooku on behalf of the Trade Federation? 2, if Palpatine does want her dead, maybe because she opposes the creation of the Republic Army. That's why that scene at the beginning should be left there, by the way, because it sets up, the premise. I realize that it's in the crawl, but not everybody's going to read that, and it still needs to be in the movie. There's a little bit of talk about whether an army should be built or not, but it takes too long before we get to that. That's the whole reason she's there, and they cut out the scene that was all about why she's there, so we keep getting all this talk about, like, signing a, not a treaty this time, but signing a, like, legislation to build this army, and we don't know what the legislation is unless you read the crawl or you pick up on the, like, 1 or 2 really quick hand-wavy times that we get it. But if Palpatine is, because we find out at the end that Palpatine and Dooku are the Sith Lords, right? That Dooku is his pupil, right? Well, Dooku is kind of behind everything. He requisitioned the army in the first place that's being built, and he also put out the hit. That's why he's using Jango Fett, I guess, because he knows a bounty hunter, even though he could use somebody else that it wouldn't come back to him, but whatever. It's very convenient. I'll get to that. But anyway, Dooku, because he's working with the Trade Federation, I guess, and the Viceroy wants her dead, wants Padme dead, puts out the hit on her. Does Palpatine want that? Is that part of their coup together, or is he doing that outside of that? And if so, why doesn't Palpatine ever tell Dooku, hey, knock that off? And if Palpatine does want her dead, why send a Jedi to protect her? And then when she goes to Naboo, why not just send somebody after her on Naboo to kill her? I don't know. Number 3, how is the plan to keep Padme safe so foolproof that nobody bothers to look for her on Naboo? Like, I know originally the idea is they think Padme is somewhere else, but you think after a while they get antsy and the Trade Federation would send more people after her. I don't know why they're so patient. They waited for 10 years now. I mean, I don't know why they did that. Number 4, why does Obi-Wan investigate the assassination plot when he says that's not the Council's orders and that they're not going to do that? Why does he jump out the window? This is another thing that Plinkett talks about. I wanted to bring it up again because it's weird. Watching his review, I never totally understood why that was such a problem. Then I watched it again. I was like, oh yeah, he makes a big deal out of, look, we're not here to investigate. Anakin says it's part of our mandate, which is BS. Like, it's not. But he's like, it's inherent in our mandate. And Obi-Wan's like, knock it off. No, it's not. We're just supposed to protect her. That's what we're told to do. And then he jumps out the window, and then it becomes all about finding the assassin. Like, suddenly, and they weren't ordered to do that. Suddenly they care about that when he didn't before. What if the whole plan, this goes along with this question, what if the whole idea of the, like, worm things being dropped in her window to kill her was the assassin thinking, maybe I can get them to leave and come try to find me so that we can leave her vulnerable and then I can kill her? How do you know? How would they know that's not what they were there to do? Number 5, I'm sure you guys have thought of all these things before. I'm late to the party. Number 5, why does a bounty hunter, this is another thing that Plinkett talks about, why does a bounty hunter that's hired to kill someone need to hire an assassin themselves? Why would the person that hires you, why would they pay you to hire someone else? Why would they be okay with that? And then you get the scene on Geonosis, where the Viceroy is like, Jango, just shoot her already. And you're like, why didn't he want Jango to do the job himself? Number 6, why doesn't the shape-shifting assassin use the shape-shifting ability to get close to the target? You'd think she'd just look like a person and then try to find a way to get close. Number 7, why is the scene that establishes the main galactic conflict get cut? And I talked about this already earlier, but that drives me nuts. Now that I've seen it, and it's a pretty okay scene, and it makes makes Padme more likable than she was all through Episode 1, and I kind of feel like I sort of understand who she is for a minute. Number 8, how did the bomb get on Padme's ship in the beginning? Number 9, is Padme's hesitation after the explosion supposed to be the start of the thematic crux of the love story? So she stops everything after her decoy gets killed, and she has to be reminded to do her duty. She's supposed to go sign that piece of legislation, or I guess stop it. It's so weird. There are places where it seems like people are talking about Padme like she would help them get the army built, but then the deleted scene is she doesn't want the army built, and I would think even though that's gone, that's still her motivation. So yeah, I'm confused about that. But yeah, it's the idea that she's supposed to do her duty and go address the Senate rather than to stop to mourn her decoy. Like, is that what sets up the whole thing with her and Anakin about duty versus affairs of the heart? Number 10, why doesn't she get a new decoy? I mean, she got one even after she was a queen, and she just almost got killed. Why wouldn't she hire somebody else to do that? I don't know who would take that job, but... Number 11, we're told about corruption in the Senate, but we don't see it really beyond Palpatine. So, again, is he just controlling everybody and he's creating the corruption, or is he taking advantage of the corruption? Number 12, we're told the Jedi are getting arrogant. It's not just Anakin. They seem to be, let's see, out of touch. Are they supposed to be the heroes or not? We've already talked about this. Number 13, what does Obi-Wan mean when he says this weapon is your life? Again, another thing that Plinkett brings up, but my side of that was all, because he just assumes that it's like, oh, this weapon is your whole life. But I read it as potentially, if you don't have this, you might not be able to protect yourself. Is that what he's talking about? I'm not sure. Number 14, is the Blade Runner city stuff at the bottom of Coruscant supposed to suggest that the Republic is falling apart? That is the most seedy stuff that we see, and if so, it does not get the job done for me. At least we have that, as opposed to in Episode 1 when it's like people are dying and starving, and we don't see any of that. Like, at least there's a seedy underbelly to Coruscant, but all we see is, like, I guess it's supposed to be dystopian because it sort of looks like Blade Runner, but is it really? You got the guy with the death sticks, but that's kind of about it. Like, they're at a bar, nobody's getting hurt until the Jedi have to fight the shapeshifter. So I don't know. I didn't get that from the first time watching it. That it's like, oh wow, the Republic really is in a bad place. Look at the seedy underbelly of Coruscant. So some of these are going to be fun little nitpicky things that I just picked up on while I was watching it. So I'll bring them up because I want to. Is that footage of Star Wars Episode 1 Racer in the bar? You get like 3 seconds on a monitor of pod racing, and it really looks like it's from that video game. I want someone to confirm this for me or not, because it really looks like it's that game. Number 16, does Anakin really look up to Obi-Wan or hate him? It's supposed to be inner conflict. I realize that he's jaded and he's back and forth between what he wants and what he's supposed to do, but boy, it watches like the movie can't tell how much respect he actually has for his mentor. Especially because, and I'll get to this in a minute, but especially because he has 2 father figures now. And remember, he didn't have a male influence growing up at all. And now he's got 2 opposing ones. He's got Palpatine, who is manipulating him and talking about power and how much more powerful of a Jedi he's going to be than all the other Jedi. And then you have Obi-Wan, who is supposed to be, you know, the wise sage that's actually steering him in the right direction, even though I feel like the Jedi are all going in the wrong direction, but maybe he's in a slightly better place than they are. There's reason to think that he's not. But anyway, it seems like he needs more screen time with Palpatine in order to really bring that idea to the fore. Okay, number 17, related to that, or kind of like that, does Padme love Anakin or pity him? It's supposed to be a gradual evolution with the relationship, but it watches, again, like the movie doesn't know. He kills a whole village. They've decided not to get together because it would ruin their careers and they can't live a lie. And then he kills a whole village of sand people, and now she's willing to endanger her career and marry him in secret, when he had already given up on that prospect and had agreed that they shouldn't risk it. All right. I'm going to read a super chat. Robert Wild, $2 super chat. Cap, thoughts on the Obi-Wan show so far? I don't want to get into that in the middle of the rewind, Robert, but I will just real quick say I was enjoying it as something of a guilty pleasure, at least, on the first couple episodes. I thought the writing was dodgy and the acting was dodgy, and I didn't like some of the, again, kind of prequelitis choices they were making. And then I got to the third episode, and I completely lost interest. I don't know if I'll keep watching that show or not. That's all I'm going to say right now. Number 18, why don't the Jedi ever be careful or watch more closely after one of them suggests doing that? Oh yeah, watch them more closely. Good job. Number 19, does Yoda suspect that Palpatine is evil? The glares he gives him sure suggest that he does, but at no point is he like, I think maybe Palpatine's behind this whole plot. Number 20, why doesn't the Council try to investigate who was trying to kill Padme until the second attempt? Now, it's very important to them that Obi-Wan has to go off on an adventure all by himself to uncover this plot. Why didn't it matter before? Number 21, why would you send Anakin alone with Padme when you know he's romantically infatuated with her and he's not allowed to pursue that? Of course, this is a thing people bring up all the time. And take her to the first place somebody would look for her. There's a bunch of Jedi, you guys. There's so many Jedi who could do that job. There's no reason to send him, except Lucas has got to contrive some way for them to spend time alone together, because otherwise Luke and Leia won't exist. There's easier ways to do that. You got to kind of redesign what the Jedi are from the beginning, I guess. Number 22, how influential, I had mentioned this already, has Palpatine been as a father figure versus Obi-Wan? He doesn't get enough screen time. Number 23, on what planet is Anakin supposed to be a sympathetic character? This, of course, is the thing that people most complain about and like to laugh at with this movie, but it's very bizarre, and the movie seems really out of touch and not very self-aware of itself with this. He's so whiny, and he's got that creepy stalker face, and we make him a murderer, but then he's still supposed to be charming, and again, that's when he and Padme are allowed to get together. But then also, and this is the thing I want to mention that I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody else say, his background is so weird, it's kind of no wonder he's like that. That's not me excusing it. That's not me saying that he's a sympathetic character and I'm glad to be watching him because I thought of this. But think about it for a second. He's born immaculately. He's got no father figure. He's got no father or father figure. He would, except for, I guess, Watto, maybe. He was a slave. He gets trained and raised by weird monks who think that the worst thing a powerful hero can do is have attachments. He's the focus of a major prophecy. I don't know how much of that he knows about, but he does have that. And his master didn't want to train him, and he's only begrudgingly doing that because it was his mentor's dying wish. Yeah, guy's gonna be kind of screwed up. 24. Why does the security guy with the eye patch say he's more worried about Padme doing something foolish with Anakin than he's worried about Anakin when they drop him off at Naboo? Like, she's a committed career woman who's never dated anyone we know of. Besides the kid that she brings up at the beginning that they didn't really have much of a relationship. And then Anakin is this lost kid with way too much power that everybody's afraid of, but let's train him anyway. I don't know why he says that. Number 25. What is the 50s diner throwing back to if there is no 50s? Number 26, why is this story a mystery when there's no satisfying revelation and it would have revealed itself anyway? Like, the clone army doesn't happen because Obi-Wan happens to find it. That was going to end up happening anyway because it's built and they're ready, and as soon as Palpatine says everything's going according to plan at the end. So he was going to bring that army out. He would have just had, I guess, Dooku, Lord Tyrannus, go there and get the clones, and when Obi-Wan finds it, it doesn't lead him to any greater revelation other than, oh, this is weird. There's clones, and somebody did this on behalf of the Republic and the Jedi, and I don't know who Sidious is. And it doesn't matter because it was actually Tyrannus, some guy named Tyrannus who did it. I also don't get, this is an aside, the bit where the leader of Kamino is standing there next to Jango Fett when Jango Fett says, I've never heard of Sidious. So, like, he's been there for 10 years, and they've been building these clones. And the name Sidious has never come up there? Is the guy who requisitioned the clones in the first place. I don't understand that. Yeah, moving right along. 27. Why are there shelves? So we go to the library in the Jedi Order and the Jedi Temple, and there's all these shelves in the library that have lights that are displayed to make it look like they have books on them, but it's all computerized and they don't have books. I don't know why they have that. Number 28. Why does Yoda... I said this already, but why does Yoda say use your feelings to the younglings when Anakin is told to ignore this? 29. Why is a 5-year-old more observant than Obi-Wan? Obviously, the data about Kamino had to have been erased. Number 30. If you're the Queen of Naboo, is it in your contract to put on a fake accent? Number 31, why is the Kamino section so much more visually and tonally intriguing than the rest of the movie? I brought that up earlier. 32, why is the first kiss scored like a Warner Brothers cartoon? This was so jarring in the theater when I first saw the movie, and movies are more self-aware these days than they used to be after certain things with MCU movies and stuff. I don't think I would be as surprised by this now. I bet kids watching this now, it doesn't faze them. But man, when John Williams puts in a cue where they're kissing, and then she pulls away, and it's the lush love theme, which is a really good theme. It's wonderfully old Hollywood. I wish that it didn't make the whole thing feel even sappier and more melodramatic because it's not used right. The writing's not good enough for it. But anyway, I like that theme. But like na 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 na, and then it just stops, and then there's like a quieter string thing that starts happening. I'm like, oh, it's a Warner Brothers cartoon. I just couldn't even deal with that in the theater. 33. What happened to all those 5-year-old clones that aren't ready for combat yet? I'm not sure how long the Clone Wars go, honestly. Like, maybe they go for another 5 years, and then those clones get brought out, and maybe in the Clone Wars TV show they actually do something with that. I'm not sure. But it was a thing I never thought about before, where on Kamino, they show you that there's these clones that have been around for 5 years that are, like, Boba Fett's age, I guess, and because I think it's that actor, I guess just so that we can have a bunch of clones that look like Boba Fett, and then they're not ready for combat yet, so what happens to them? 34, why are all the clone troopers in CGI? 35, why is it forbidden for Padme to marry? I asked that before. 36, what possesses Lucas to write this line from Obi-Wan? R4, scramble the code to Coruscant, care of the old folks home. That was a weird choice. 37, why exactly has the Jedi's ability to use the Force diminished? That's a real big question. And the movie, the script just seems to be kind of limping along, going, well, we can't let the Jedi know too much. So we've got to contrive a way for them to be impotent with their Force powers, but we don't know how far that goes or what exactly that means. I wonder if that's also, if they're also supposed to be not as powerful as they usually would be when they go to Geonosis, because there's like 400 of them and they're just fighting a bunch of robots, and you'd think that that would end in like 6 seconds with Force users, but no. So is the idea, and if so, do all the Jedi know that their ability to use the Force has diminished? I guess it's just Palpatine is also affecting that. I don't know. 38. Why does Anakin finally know his mother is in danger now? Like, he's having these dreams about her, and then suddenly he goes, oh, she's been kidnapped and I know where she is. I would have, if I'm writing the script, I would have just had the nightmare start now instead of setting that up. Like, you might say, oh, well, that would read convenient that we hadn't heard about it before. No, that's the opposite of convenient. It's inconvenient. His mother is in mortal danger, and now he has to choose between protecting Padme on Naboo like he was told to, and go save his mother. That's an okay, and I mean, yeah, it's there so that we can see him go dark, and I think where he goes is too quickly, of course. But why not just not have the dreams yet? 39. Why doesn't Obi-Wan have a better plan for taking Jango in for questioning him when they're on Kamino? They're just running out with a lightsaber. And what kind of Jedi is Obi-Wan if he can't subdue one single bounty hunter? Senior 6, a $5 super chat. The problem is they tried to condense his backstory. Also, all questions can be answered with a space wizard did it. I know. But I wanted to break this down like I'm a viewer that doesn't know that reveal's going to happen. But also, I'm not 100% sure how much of it is supposed to be that, because it's all just a big mystery that Lucas doesn't have the answer to, right? And it's not a compelling mystery because we're never gonna know, and the idea is not, there's this real cool reveal we're gonna have at some point with this mystery that's unfolding. The idea is he's working his way backwards from a conclusion. We know what happens to a lot of these characters. We have to get there. We know what happens to the Republic, and it becomes the Empire. We have to get there. And he doesn't know how to have a huge order of powerful sorcerers, basically, of Jedi. And for Palpatine to be able to take over the way he does. In the behind-the-scenes features, there's a place where Rick McCallum, I think, one of the producers, says that they were really worried that if the Jedi knew too much about what was going on and they couldn't solve it, that they would look weak. So that's why they had to contrive a way for them to not know anything. Okay, well then it makes them either mind-controlled or stupid. How's that better? And again, it's hard. That's why this looks like a bad idea. I think it's possible to do it better than it's done, but it ends up at the end of the day looking like not the way we should have gone, that we should have gone forward. Especially when you have novels that do go forward that create narratives that you'd love to see on film, and when you have, with the Thrawn stuff, and when you have actors in 2002 that are still young enough to play the characters a decade or two later. It's just, you're so ripe for going forward. It's really unfortunate he chose not to do that. And I know Lucas has been a little bit contradictory in different places, where he's at one point said, like, the idea was always to have prequels and there was never going to be a 7, 8, and 9. And I think somewhere else he contradicts that. I forget now. But, like, it doesn't really matter what the plan was. Like, what was the smartest and most compelling thing to do narratively? 40. Does Anakin still have an explosive in his head from when he was a slave? This was a question that Austin brought up when he and I were talking about this, and so wanted to credit him, but still put that in here. I had not thought about that, but he has that line in the first movie where he says, if you try to escape and you're a slave, there's a chip in your head, like Suicide Squad. They blow you up. Does he still have that? Who's they? Was Watto gonna do that? Was it the Hutts? I don't know. 41. Why is Lucas so bad at casting convincing children? Boba Fett's sinister laugh is the worst. 42. Why does Anakin leave Padme with Lars on Tatooine? He says, these are good people. You'll be safe. He's trusting her safety to a guy in a wheelchair and a like young 20-something-year-old man and his wife who couldn't keep his mother safe, and that's why he has to go rescue her. Like, you could say, oh, well, but the Trade Federation and Dooku and everybody still doesn't know where they are, so nobody's going to be after him. But it's Tatooine. It's kind of a dangerous place, I mean, just in general. Okay, 43. Why does Duel of the Fates play when Anakin goes to rescue his mother? This was another thing that kind of floored me in the theater, where I was like, I mean, maybe this isn't supposed to be just the theme of Darth Maul. It's played that way in Episode 1, but it really kind of just feels like everybody liked Duel of the Fates. Here's a place we could throw that in. 44. Why are Anakin and Obi-Wan split up through most of the movie that's supposed to showcase their friendship? I think that's one of the biggest missteps with this, actually, is that they spend most of the movie apart. 45. Why, I said this earlier, why hasn't Newt Gunray tried to kill Padme before now? 46. Maybe there's a line about this and I missed it. Why are the Tuscan Raiders keeping Anakin's mom prisoner? Like, Lars doesn't think there's any way she's lived for a whole month? I don't know why they've kept her alive. 46, or 47. Why does Yoda hear Qui-Gon when Anakin kills the Tuscans, but not Anakin? Like, we'll get the line at the end of 3, where Yoda says that he's communing with Qui-Gon. He's going to tell Obi-Wan how to do that. And I was kind of expecting, by the way, in Obi-Wan, for quick spoilers, this is a minor thing, for him to show up. Maybe he will somewhere in the show, but I'm 3 in. That hasn't happened yet. But yeah, you hear Qui-Gon say Anakin, and Anakin doesn't hear it. And I just thought that was kind of weird. 48. Why isn't anyone more concerned about the genocide? It's not full-on genocide yet, but Anakin killing not just the men, but also the women and the children, and I hate them. Why isn't anybody like really freaked out about that? Because I talked about Padme's reaction to that a little bit, where it's like after that is when she'll get with him. But even Yoda, he tells Mace Windu, Anakin is in pain, but not that he's in revenge mode. He's like young Skywalker, or what does he say? Young Skywalker is in a terrible pain. You're missing the part where he's murdering people, and also you're hearing Qui-Gon yell at Anakin like, "You're not supposed to be murdering people right now." What is that dialogue? It doesn't follow. We are just about 20 of these away, and then I will answer some more questions. I got a couple of super chats. Thanks so much, Batman Rocks. I'll get to that in just a little bit. Why does Anakin wear black, besides that he's getting darker in the story? especially in the desert. Number 50, why is Padme less reluctant to go with Anakin after he murders sand people? I talked about that. 51, why isn't anyone suspicious when seconds after the creation of an army is approved, suddenly there's an army? Does no one know how long it takes, it takes people to make clones? The cloners? Nobody questions it. They just have clones, and the Jedi not looking a gift horse in the mouth. They're just working with the clones now, even though the whole thing is really ominous and messed up, and they're like, yeah, the Jedi Council didn't authorize this. Why are there clones? And then Yoda's like, I'm going to go take a look at these clones. And then suddenly, on Geonosis, he shows up at the 11th hour as a Deus Ex Machina, saves everybody. It's like, I guess the war started. We got clones. It's really bizarre, and, like, nobody questions that. And the one person that does is the person that asked for the clones in the first place, who I can only assume is supposed to just be lying and pretending like he doesn't know anything about it. When Dooku, in front of the Trade Federation guys, goes, hey, how do they have a clone? How do they have an army this fast? Like, that's impossible. But we're told Tyrannus was the guy who requisitioned them, so I guess he's just lying? I'm not sure. 52, if it's supposed to be ambiguous as to whether Dooku is evil, as they say in... I've never heard this before. As they say in the special features, why is he wearing a Darth Vader chain? 53, why does Dooku tell Obi-Wan about Sidious when he's in league with him? What does that gain him? He's like, Obi-Wan, there's this Dark Lord of the Sith, and he's doing all these machinations in the background. And he basically tells him everything that's actually happening. And you could say, oh, well, it's this, great master manipulator thing where he tells some people the truth and he tells some people lies, and he's positioning people where he needs to position them, and isn't he a great strategist? But I don't know what it gains him. I don't know why he does that. And there's a deleted scene where he was originally supposed to have some of that dialogue instead of being with Obi-Wan, with Padme and Anakin when they first get captured on Geonosis. And that's not there. He doesn't tell Anakin about that, but he tells Obi-Wan to try to get... Like, I get why he does it. That it's to try to get him on his side and to make it seem like he's not the bad guy here, but it's so... I don't know, it's just so thinly written. Like, seconds later, he makes it really clear that his heart's not in the right place. Like, at the very least, it's not going to surprise anybody when he turns out to be the pupil of the, Dark Lord of the Sith. But, like, why tell him about any of that? I don't know. I mentioned this already. 54 was, are the Senate and Council actually under magical influence by Sidious? Because Dooku says that. 55, how much battle training has Padme had? Because she sure looks like she's good at video games when she's running through the droid factory. 56, why isn't there C-3PO level comic relief earlier in the movie, besides the, couple of lines from Jar Jar we have? And I haven't brought up the Jar Jar thing. That's been talked about to death. It's so dry and stilted early on without a lot of, traditional Star Wars comic relief, and then it comes totally out of nowhere. It's very tonally confused. 57, why am I not feeling anything in the droid factory scene when our heroes are almost pounded and then almost melted to death? 58, how am I supposed to find Anakin charming after the women and children, I hate them speech? He goes, Obi-Wan is going to kill me, and loses his lightsaber. And I'm like, that scene doesn't work after I've seen you murder people. Sorry. 59, I can't decide, and that's why I'm asking this as a question. So, again, there are deleted scenes where we see the trial. We see a meeting with Dooku, and then we see a trial before Padme and Anakin are brought out into the, Roman Colosseum to be executed. Do we need that scene? It does feel weird without it, now that I know it was shot. I can't remember if before I felt like it was real jarring and we just rushed straight to the Colosseum, but now that I know about that scene, I can't unsee it. It feels weird that we don't have it. 60, why does Dooku why did Dooku and the Trade Federation try to execute Padme publicly instead of just killing her when they sent an assassin in the first place? Dooku's like, patience, Viceroy, patience. And I'm like, why? 61, how come Mace Windu turns into Sam Jackson on Geonosis? He's like, this party's over. Suddenly he's a whole different character. 62, can any Jedi, and I'm sure there's an answer to this in EU stuff, but just for the sake of these movies, can any Jedi use any other Jedi's lightsaber? Because I didn't think they could, but you have the bit where Anakin gets the green one on Geonosis, and somebody just throws them. Is that the same lightsaber that Luke gets? He's got the green one now. Is he going to get a different green one later? I can't even remember. I'm just asking this because I can't remember. 63. Why does C-3PO's head think it's a battle droid momentarily? His head, that's supposed to be, this really fun comic relief bit, and it's okay. It's kind of the thing with Empire again, but he's got his head on a battle droid, and he's like, die, Jedi dogs, and I'm like, how much of the programming is in the chest that would then go into... How does that even work? 64. I promise I'll get to super chats in a minute. In a couple minutes. Who told Yoda to show up with the clone army at Geonosis when he just went to investigate them? 65. How am I expected to root for an army of stormtroopers? Wouldn't the stakes feel higher if it was real people in danger? If it was essentially two evil armies fighting? Like, even if they're both at the end of the day going to kind of be bad guy armies, it'd be nice if there were like real personal stakes. We avoided that real hard in episode 1. We're doing it here too. 66. Dooku, my master will never allow the Republic to get away with this treachery. I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't know what treachery he's referring to. He ordered the army to be built secretly for the Republic. Unless I am not understanding that line. But aren't we told that Tyrannus asked for the... Is it his assumption that things aren't going the way Sidious wants until he says they are at the end? And surely he's got to be lying, again, when he says to the Viceroy, how could they build an army so quickly? But I'm not sure. By the way, I'm not going to, from now on, break things down this nitty-gritty with every review I do. I didn't know how to talk about this movie on just a character and story level because there's just not any meat on the bone with the romance story, and the plot is so confusing that I don't understand the themes. So I feel like I have to break down the plot as much as I am, even though this has been done to death on the internet. I feel like it's the only way to talk about this movie. And I found weird little things I hadn't heard anybody talk about before, so I hope people don't mind. 67. Why does everyone in these movies hide stuff where people are most likely to find them? It's like, let's take Amidala and put her on Naboo. No one will think to look for her there. We do it again with the Death Star plans. Dooku goes, we'll take them to Coruscant, where my master is. They'll be safe there. I'm like, that's where the Jedi are also, though. Okay, 68. I hated this in the theater, too. Why do we have the zoom in and out of focus shots in battle sequences like we're watching Firefly or Battlestar Galactica? It didn't feel right for Star Wars at this period anyway, to me. At 69, why doesn't Obi-Wan care about protecting Padme anymore when she falls out of the ship? When she's like, Anakin, you have to... Obi-Wan's like, you gotta do your duty. Like, Padme would do her duty. You're gonna be expelled from the Jedi Order! And I'm like, you guys' job was to protect her. Well, why does it not matter now? It's like, instantly, we have a battle, and we're all at war, and we're all generals now. And there's been no declaration of war, there's been no discussion of war. It's a battle, and there probably is gonna be a war after this, but... Why does it not matter to protect Padme anymore? Like, maybe it's just because she can't prevent war anymore now that she's a senator. It looks like war's happening, but that wasn't... The problem is there wasn't really an impetus behind protecting her, except she's a senator and she needs protecting. And that's why you needed that scene at the beginning. If it's not all about... What was the motivation behind her being killed? That's asked over and over again. All we ever finally get is... The Viceroy's still pissed off at her from 10 years ago from episode 1. That's what it watches like. But what I think it's initially supposed to be is she doesn't want what we're having right now, the Army of the Republic. And now we have the Army of the Republic, and so there's no problem anymore. Like, is that why? Is that why she's kind of expendable now? I mean, I get the idea that Obi-Wan's like, and this seems a little bit ambiguous, but a little vague, but Obi-Wan's like, look, I can't take Tyrannus on alone. Hey, you can't take a bounty hunter on alone, so that makes sense. So I'm going to have you, Anakin, come with me, and your duty is to make sure that he doesn't escape, because he's like, we can maybe end this war before it begins, which, I mean, I could sort of see how that would be more important than saving Padme, but it's thin. There's not enough. I don't understand the motivations of these characters in general, and that's a place where I'm just confused. I don't feel like people are talking like real people. I'm talking in circles because I'm thinking there's a way that you can convince me that would be his argument. I'm not convinced that with the execution of that. 70. Is Force lightning a thing that you get if you embrace the dark side, or do you just have to be an older person to do it? 71. Why does Yoda move so slow on his cane when we just saw him beat Dooku in a duel? 72. Why does Yoda name the Clone War like he knows it's gonna happen? Begun the Clone War has. And that would be like if Eisenhower was like, begun World War II has. And finally, 73. Who's that guy at the end when Padme and Anakin get married? Like, I assume he's marrying them, but, like, who's that guy? Anyway, okay, there we go. I have now reviewed Attack of the Clones, and I'm going to finally go to a few more questions from you guys watching live. We got a big crowd. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so much, and I hope you have enjoyed my hour and 45 minutes so far on this movie. Batman Rocks, $20 super chat, arrived pretty late, so not sure if this was mentioned. With much better writing, character work, and by the way, thanks so much for the super chat, the character work, and basically everything else a film building to and climaxing in the Clone Wars would have been an enthralling plot through line. Well, sure, yeah. I mean, you're basically saying that not a lot is working in this movie, and yes, of course. Building to and climaxing the Clone Wars. Yeah, I mean, I still, and you missed the beginning, I still maintain that the Clone Wars being just a big thing that Anakin was involved in should have maybe been the first movie, in the first place. And maybe it goes through a couple of these. But I get why a lot of people, especially that grew up with these, love the Clone Wars now as an idea and get kind of enraptured with the clone troopers as real characters, which nothing is done with in the movies. And I just never really liked that idea in the first place, so I have a hard time getting excited about that. Like, when I've tried to look at, and I haven't spent a lot of time with it, the few times I've tried to look at the Clone Wars TV show, I just can't get into it. I don't really care for the way those stories are put together from what little I've looked at. And I've looked at stuff that people have told me, like, this is great, you'll love this. And I'm like, it's fine, it's better than these. But I think part of the problem is just, it's all built from a faulty premise in the first place. So there's probably some individual episodes where I go, this is really good writing. This is some really nice character stuff. And where I'd actually like Anakin a little bit more. And people have said great things about his relationship with Ahsoka past the cartoon movie, which is terrible. And all of that. But it's hard to get excited about because I just don't think this is what the Clone Wars should have been. It's all a bunch of clones of one guy. It's such a provocative idea before you know what it actually is. Like, the Clone Wars. Like, who are the clones that we're fighting? Thanks so very much for the super chat. Ben, Script Super is a name I don't immediately recognize. Welcome. Another $20 super chat. So cool of you. Really appreciate it. Above all else, do you think it's poetry that rhymes? Thanks for the show. Yeah, that's a real popular and infamous thing that Lucas said in the behind the scenes on, I think, episode 1. It's not in these, I don't think, but in one of these movies he said that. And I mean, kind of superficially, he's and the problem, of course, is it's supposed to rhyme. Like, when is it supposed to rhyme, right? You've got I think it's funny because there's not any more thought put into it than that. It's, well, we repeated ourselves with a phrase or with a visual idea or a situation or whatever. We've got a fight over a pit, like you have in one of the original movies, and you have the scene, the asteroid with a ship that's hiding, just like we did with the Millennium Falcon and Empire. Just over and over again, you have all these things. And again, I really don't mind them. I think that kind of parallel stuff, if Anakin's character arc was paralleled more with Luke's, is all fine and could be cool, as long as it doesn't watch like we're ripping ourselves off because we can't think of anything more interesting to do. And sometimes it does kind of watch that way, not as much as some of the stuff with the Disney sequels. Sometimes things get put into perspective. I'm not saying that these movies are now better than those because I have issues with those. I don't really think that's true. They've got, some of them have different issues, I guess, but it's like, when are they supposed to rhyme? Are you supposed to watch, and I've asked this before, are you supposed to watch these three movies now and then watch the new ones and go, look, we're paying off a thing in 2, or from 2, in Empire now? I don't know. I'm not sure if Lucas knows. Senior Sticks, $2 super chat. I think Jarrell might know all this. Yes, these were all from my old Crypto Freak show. These were all just questions to ask myself when to ask Jarrell when I get to heaven. Let me make sure I'm not missing any super chats, guys. Batman Rocks, another $20 super chat. You're wonderful. I really appreciate you. Dooku could have easily been made a parallel to Anakin. Yeah, sure. Both were Jedi who were disillusioned with the philosophy. In a way, it could have been similar to how Shaw in First Class was a mirror to who Eric would inevitably become. That's a terrific point. Austin and I were talking about this earlier today, the Day Ghost, who works with me on the channel, and he suggested, and I don't know if I'd thought of this before or not, but I want to mention it because it was his idea. He brought up the idea that Qui-Gon should have been Dooku. That you have a mentor that you come to like and respect in the first movie, and then you see him go dark, which would certainly foreshadow what's going on with Anakin, but I think it also, if you had something like that, where you actually see it happen, you run the risk of it feeling like prequelitis, where you go, okay, you had in the original trilogy talk about Anakin going to the dark side, and it sounded, nobody ever says he's the only one that ever did, but it sounds like that's what makes him unique and tragic, and then you find out that there's all these other Jedi that have done that, and it's not just Dooku. When you get into EU and a lot of other Star Wars things, you go, the Inquisitors and everything, you go, okay, there's all of these evil, not Sith Lords, because you have the rule of 2, so we got to sidestep that and find a way to have Force users doing lightsaber tricks and stuff that aren't actually Sith, but you go, they're all former Jedi, because we had a whole bunch of them, and we're going to find Force users, even though there's a lot of Force users, and they don't all become Jedi, but, whatever. And so you do run the risk of lessening the impact of he's going to go dark, but at the same time, if the Jedi have lost their way, it seems like it would happen more, so I can see the merits to doing it that way. Here's a thought that I don't see in my notes, but I'm glad I just thought of because I really wanted to bring this up. I'd never thought of this before either, and maybe some of you guys that are bigger Star Wars fans than I am have thought of this, but I would think that you would be shooting yourself in the foot potentially as the Jedi Order. Maybe not, because they have plenty of Jedi in the Order. Maybe not enough, because they can't be an army. We're soldiers, or we're not soldiers. We're keepers of the peace, says Mace Windu at the beginning. But now they need an army, and they don't want to use the clone army, I guess, even though they seem sort of fine with it at the end. But they're stuck with that. So maybe it'd be good if there were more of them. Maybe not if they really lost their way. But anyway, wouldn't you be shooting yourself in the foot if you went, Jedi are not allowed to copulate? Because there are Force users that just naturally are born and are lucky, they're gifted, they're Force users, but you don't know who and how many and where they all are. But if you let Jedi have families, then you'd always know that you had more potential Jedi, because Force users always beget Force users. So why are they making them celibate priests then? That's another reason that's weird. Okay, Daniel Davis, so much for ending this soon. I just meant I was ending my notes. And I did that, and now I'm reading some questions. But Robert Wild, Cap, it's because Yoda saw the original trilogy. Duh. Yes, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of he read, or somebody read the script. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we're already almost at 2 hours. If you have more questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to throw them in right now, and I can get back to this. But why don't I go ahead and do tweet length reviews right now while I'm thinking of it. So the $5 tier on Patreon gets you access to tweet length, or lets you put in tweet length reviews, and you can, for each of these reviews that I'm doing weekly now on Sundays, if it's a movie you've seen or if you want to go watch it, you can write a short review and put it on Patreon, and I will read it for you so that everybody can know your wonderful, spectacular opinion, and you can put in a rating on the 0 to 4 scale, and I encourage you guys, if you want to, in the comments right now, to do that in a $5 super chat if you are so inclined, and I will read it, or you can become a patron and do it next time. It's up to you, if you are so inclined. Here we go. Chewbacca's Lover. The weakest of the prequel trilogy, but like all three, there are a lot of creative stuff and inspired things that just aren't done well. It's still better than the sequel trilogy, 1 out of 4. MattBat68, second worst Star Wars movie, beaten only by Rise of Skywalker. I'm not sure where I fall on that. This movie is pretty bad overall. There's some interesting things to noodle, and I'm not sure how much of it is even intentional. But even Rise of Skywalker, I think, is more cohesive than this movie. It's got it's super convoluted too. It's got some other problems. It maybe watches the most prequel-y of the three Disney sequels, of course. They're maybe a little bit difficult to compare, but yeah, I'm not sure where I fall on that. But I've also only seen Rise of Skywalker like twice, and I can't take this especially seriously, but that movie I'm just laughing at from front to back. It's a different experience. Goofstar123, a misguided attempt at a Shakespearean love story. Lots of fascinating ideas and inspired choices. Christopher Lee is magnetic. He's great. Not my personal favorite, but a solid entry in the saga. 3 out of 4, so much higher than anybody else so far, and maybe than anybody through the rest of this. Michael Martin, as a whole, the film is a convoluted mess. 1 out of 4. But I just want to point out that they give a slave army to Anakin Skywalker and apparently forget that he was a slave. I feel like he might have opinions on that. That's a terrific point that I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it. And I wanted to make sure not bring that up during the review because I was going to read your comment. But I was thinking about that all week. I was like, yeah, that's a good call. Like, they're kind of slaves and they're kind of not, because the clones fall somewhere between regular human beings who have a will of their own and droids. And if they're grown in a lab and they're programmed to do whatever they're told, I can see the morality of this universe, most people going, they're basically just droids that are organic, is what I was looking for. They're basically just organic droids, like human droids. But then again, you get into extra media, other material like Clone Wars, and I guess they are people with real feelings and stuff. In this, they don't really seem to be, but but you do kind of have to wonder where he lands on that, and also you'd have to wonder how Anakin feels about it as a machinist, as somebody who fixes things, because he doesn't see droids as people. And this was built by science. So would he look at them more like machines or like people, given both parts of his backstory. That's a terrific point. Stone Gassman, aside from everything Harry S. Plinkett said in the Red Letter Media review, Yoda and Christopher Lee were admitted standouts. Nauseatingly unromantic love story makes The Notebook look like The Shawshank Redemption. 0.5 out of 4. And Austin, the Day Ghost, Star Wars, more like endless trash. 0 out of 4. 0. Austin gets extreme with his counts. Michael Austin Gulick, clumsy like the other prequels and probably the most boring of the three. The final product feels more like a first draft with underdeveloped plotting and placeholder dialogue left in. That's a great way to look at it. I said first draft too, but I like placeholder dialogue. That's a good call. It's a great example of a movie to leave on in the background and check in on occasionally. 1 out of 4. Some really well-written reviews here, guys. I really appreciate you. Thanks so much. Connor Nielsen. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. In attempting to craft his own Gone with the Wind or Dr. Zhivago, Lucas wound up producing a work whose ambition was matched only by its amateur storytelling ability. A film as bad as The Empire Strikes Back is good. Wow, quite possibly the worst blockbuster of the young century. 0.5 out of 4. Kareem Roberts, Romeo and Juliet in Space sounds interesting enough. That's obviously the way to put it. And I said Shakespeare earlier, but I wasn't talking specifically about Romeo and Juliet. And it is kind of trying to be the Montague and Capulet thing, in that, I mean, this is less about station than it is about rank. And I think that's how John Williams puts it in the special features on this. But, again, faulty premise I never bought. Romeo and Juliet in Space sounds interesting enough. That's about where it ends. Stale, awkward, clunky, narratively painful, vapid, and just visually ugly. Also, weirdly appreciated by the generation that grew up with the prequels. Just plain bizarre. 0.5 out of 4. Yeah, and I don't want to disrespect anybody who likes what they like when I agree with you on that, but I've always had a little bit of a, modern versus old school Sonic the Hedgehog thing with the Star Wars prequels with some folks that grew up with it. It's the Star Wars they know. It's the lore they love. It all begins in this place for some people, and they appreciate it in a way that I can't because I wasn't there with it, and I've always wondered if I would like these more. If it would be more like a Batman 89 situation where I would just be like, even if I appreciated and understood all the flaws, just couldn't bring myself to not still like what I like and not be real critical of it, or even if I was real critical of it, I don't care. I still like, because I have that with things that I grew up with, absolutely. And I've never understood people's love for some of the modern Sonic games in exactly the same way, when I don't think a lot of them stand anywhere close to the original Genesis games. So it's a real similar thing. Saqib Tariq, Star Wars Episode 2. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and I don't like it. 0.5 out of 4. Back Studios, Misa proposing we should be completely forgetting about dissing here Filmo Okie Day. I actually do a fairly decent Jar Jar Binks accent, but I haven't thought about it in a long time. I didn't warm up for it, so I'm not going to do it. Saqib beat me to it, so that's all I got, says Bag. And finally, Christian Ogden, before Disney got their evil empire hands on the franchise, this was my least favorite entry. Some entertaining action and a couple of decent performances from McGregor and Lee can't overcome the fact that this should have been episode 1. Oh, he agrees with me. So Anakin turning evil would have had more time to develop naturally. Some stilted acting from most of the cast, and love dialogue that is so painfully corny, I almost wish I was watching Twilight. 2 out of 4. Wow. Senior Sticks just put in a $2 super chat and says, Yoda, people fell to the dark side. That's probably why. I'm not sure what he was referring to there. I already read that super chat. Senior Sticks, Shakespeare has wooden villains. Yeah, and the sensibilities and the mechanics of writing at the various times is different. What's the word I'm looking for? It's getting late now. But yeah, the conventions are certainly not the same. Man, I like all the Sonic games. It's all about trying to get open-minded. And you know, I've gone back and tried. I can't appreciate them, you know, as much, I guess. For example, you can make Romeo and Juliet work in modern fiction. Mobile Suit Gundam, the 08th team, has done it. Yeah, absolutely. Good call. Robert, while I still like this movie more than the Clone Wars animated movie, Solo, and The Rise of Skywalker. I don't think I could put this over Solo if we're just going to compare everything now. And that Clone Wars movie is just not. It's just hard to sit through. It's I'm not sure how exactly to compare it to this. I don't like it. Maybe I would rather watch this than that. I don't know. Oh, that's hilarious. Robert Wild. Attack of the Clones is a more appropriate title for Jurassic Park movie, honestly. Batman Rocks just put in another super chat. Thanks so much, man. $10. Last one. Out of curiosity, is there a potential Civil War rewind coming? Still remains my favorite MCU film, but I get it's a huge one to tackle in this unscripted format. Also, this movie blows bad. Yeah, thanks again so very much. I don't know how soon I will get to Civil War, but it's a movie I've been meaning to try to get to for a long time. And of course, I haven't been really reviewing the MCU movies in order, but some of it's weird to say that's one of the early ones now, but of the ones I haven't reviewed, it's a little earlier in the catalog. I've really been wanting to get to that because obviously it sets up so much of what happens afterwards when I finally start getting back to MCU stuff. And I like that movie a lot, and it'll be fun to sink my analytical teeth into that. It'll be difficult to do in this format, certainly. And these have all been running around 2 hours, but it's a podcast. I'm trying to take my time and really interact with you guys and let it take the time it's going to take. So, as always, those of you that don't like the real long-form stuff, feel free to skip around or to really take your time with it. Stop and watch a little bit later. And those of you that watch live and stick around the whole time, I really appreciate you, and I hope you're enjoying it. This is becoming the highlight of the week for me. I didn't think this would work out, or I was concerned that it might not, and you guys have been a big part of making it work, and it's just been kind of a fun thing to try and to really stretch my legs in public speaking and in trying to speak off the cuff and do as much of the kind of stuff I would do scripted as I can. And I'm also partly making these longer for folks that really like that, to make up for the fact that I don't have the time and the energy to really do the scripted thing right, which is with the way my life is now, which is a lot of the reason I haven't been doing that lately. But anyway, I appreciate you guys, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do my rating now. I feel like I have to go to a 1 out of 4, and I guess that 1 is for the visual stuff that I do really like, even if I'm not a big fan of how some of it's translated to screen. But man, I love the Camino section. I don't understand some of it because I don't think some of it can be understood, but I want the whole movie to be that. I really like the Camino section. Obviously, like everybody, I like the acting with Obi-Wan and with Dooku, and that choice is inspired with Christopher Lee, and Yoda is still Yoda in places. Him flipping around with a lightsaber was a bad move, I've always felt, but there are places where it feels like he's the only Jedi that still gets the philosophy, and I just wish the movie would make it clear enough if that's what it's supposed to be. I don't put a lot of this at Christiansen's feet. I think he's doing the best he can. He's working with not good material and with a director that's not giving him what he needs, I think. So that makes it really difficult. But I guess that one point I'm giving it is for some of the thematic things that I'm pulling out of it that I'm finding really interesting, and that I think that the movie does want to be about, even if it's not communicating it right. And then again, some of the atmospheric stuff and visual stuff that I am kind of liking about it. As a story, it's baffling, it's perplexing, it's all over the place, and it's a surreal experience, and even more surreal watching twice in one weekend. Next time, I'm gonna be talking about a movie I've talked about before. So I'm going to get back to superhero stuff next time. It'll be Superhero Rewind again. And for the Rewind Selection Board, and quick plug, you can become, part of the Rewind Selection Board at the $10 tier. On Patreon, we've overhauled it. We've added a lot of perks at that tier, and you can become a real producer on the show, where you can have a real influence on what I'm doing here and get very involved. We're also going to meet once a month and talk about the show and about superhero movies, and sometimes we'll even do a private watch party together. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've already got about a dozen guys there, and everybody's been really nice and fun and engaging, and talking a lot about superhero movies. So that's a private Discord that we have with that tier. But anyway, quick plug for that, and you can become part of, again, the selection board and help me pick movies. So the movie that they chose was from a list of 5, and it's for a movie to do a revisited review on. I'm going to go back to the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, finally, which, when I first reviewed that movie, that review doesn't hold up at all, because I reviewed it just before the first Andrew Garfield movie came out. I made it all about what I thought or maybe just the reboot had been announced even, I'm not sure. And it was all about what a reboot should do and not do based on that first movie. And this time I'm going to actually review it. So join me for that, if you will. I am going out of town, guys, next week on Monday, and I might have to get up early for that. So the plan right now is to do that review Sunday. If things work out where I just don't think that makes sense, I'll move it, or I may have to take a week off. I'm not sure yet, but I'll keep everybody posted. This is going to be a really busy month for me, so I may have to do 1 or 2 less of these, but I am going to keep this up weekly as much as humanly possible. When I got trips, it's maybe a little bit different. But anyway, so like I said, plug for Patreon, $10 tier makes you a Patreon producer. You get a lot more than just getting your name read, but you still get that as well. And I'm going to do that right now, right after I say thank you so much to all of our patrons at any tier, and you still can leave a tweet-length review for each of these at the $5 tier. You don't have to be a producer to do that part of it. If you're a producer, you still get to do that, and lots more. Thanks to all of my Rewind producers, including Zach, Wendell Jones, Thorne Jones, Slipmaker, Michael Gulick, Kareem Roberts, Jacob Schneider, Damon Begay, Checkers, The Inventor, Thomas Edgehill, The Day Ghost, Super Billy Stone Gassman, Michael Martin, Josh Gulsano, John Sandoval, Jajira Hot Soup, Goofster123, Elliot Slater, Dylan Musiello, Chewbacca's Lover, and Blake. You guys rock. And everybody watching rocks as well. I really hope that I didn't miss any super chats, but I don't think I did. And that's going to do it. So, thanks a lot, everybody. Hope you had a good time. I certainly did. And I'll see you again real soon with more videos here on Geekvolution. I'm Captain Logan. Bye, everybody.